Hello guys, Griff here, and in this video I'll be showing you some super secret Starfield features that will almost certainly be in the game. That's what I think anyway. The features you're about to see haven't officially been revealed yet, so when Bethesda does eventually tell you about them, just make sure to act all surprised and stuff. Okay, we'll start with dynamic gravity. Now, this is a blink and you'll miss it moment, but if we pause the gameplay showcase and zoom in, we can see that the world's gravity has been designated a number. This means that the precise level of gravity changes depending on what planet you're on. Some planets might have crushing gravity that requires you having the equipment to withstand it, and for that I'm thinking reinforced ship hulls and maybe specialized spacesuits, so you can actually land there. Maybe your conventional firearms will even be less effective, with bullet drop being exaggerated and forcing you to use a pneumatic weapon or melee devices. On the other end of the scale, some planets might have less gravity, resulting in higher jumps that launch you higher into the sky and weird wildlife that's adapted to these lighter conditions. Maybe on a lower gravity planet, you can even carry more items, so you can take the opportunity to fill your inventory with all sorts of useful crafting materials before storing them on your ship. One thing that's really exciting for me is this description of the Serpent's Embrace trait, and this says that grav jumping provides a temporary boost to health and endurance. Now, it's not explained precisely what grav jumping means, but it could be quite literally that, jumping in lower gravity. Jumping in lower gravity gives you more health and endurance. This is all speculation, of course, as Bethesda haven't said a word about how gravity works in the game, but it's just such a dead giveaway that I can't imagine there's uniform gravity conditions across the board. I mean, we've already seen zero-G environments. Here the player is having a zero-G shootout with enemies in some sort of cargo hold, and I love the details here. We can see each bullet casing floating off out of sight after the player fires. Each object in the environment is affected by the lack of gravity too. Notice how anything not tied down is floating freely around the environment. That's pretty cool. This scenario is just crying out for some sort of force-based weapon to smash these objects right into the enemies. This is what the physics engine was made for. But anyway, the developers being able to manipulate gravity opens up a ton of gameplay possibilities, and I'm really excited to see if any of these predictions come true. Next up, we have underwater gameplay. The amount of underwater gameplay shown off so far has been a big fat zero. This is Subnautica gameplay you're watching here, not Starfield. But I would be massively surprised if you were locked to the land in Starfield the entire time. One piece of evidence I'm looking at that's pointing to the existence of underwater gameplay is this settlement. It's called Neon, and it's set on a planet that's made up entirely of water, or at least mostly of water. According to Bethesda in this short location reveal video, Neon was built as a fishing settlement, but the settlers soon found that the fish they were selling actually releases a chemical that could be made into a potent drug. So instead of selling fish, they sold the drugs instead, turning Neon into a sort of space Amsterdam, where it's only legal to consume this drug within its borders. Sketchy substances aside, having a planet covered by water would just be insanely weird if it didn't let you at least dip a toe into that water. This isn't GTA Vice City. I mean, an open world sandbox game released in 2023 would not be able to get away with not letting you swim, unless it said something like that body of water is contaminated or something. But there are 1,000 planets in this game and they're incredibly diverse, so it's reasonable to assume that this isn't the only planet with water. As for whether the engine is capable of supporting swimming, whether that's on the surface or underwater, you've been able to swim in every Bethesda RPG since 1994's The Elder Scrolls Arena, so odds are it's going to be making a return. Swimming is conventionally used to find shortcuts out of dungeons, increase your physical attributes, and it also gives you a way to find hidden treasure below the water. If you can swim in Starfield, it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility to have some sort of scuba gear to give you oxygen, or maybe a small personal propeller vehicle to boost your speed. A bit like Subnautica's Sea Glide. gameplay. Now, I'm not expecting anything to the extent of Subnautica's underwater environments. That's going a bit far when we already have all of space to discover, but at the absolute minimum, I fully expect at least a bit of underwater gameplay. Anything from looting some submerged armor to exploring a sunken settlement, maybe with echoes of that submarine mission in Fallout 4. Really enjoyed that one. The only thing that makes me question this a tiny bit is that we haven't seen a single water planet in actual gameplay yet, and I would have thought that with all the environments they've already showed off, they might at least want to hype up their water tech a tiny bit. But hey, at this point, they probably don't want to take away from all the other things they revealed so far. Like, we haven't seen weather effects yet, for instance, but we know for a fact they're in the game. So swimming, yeah, we'll wait and see, but my guess is yes. Our next secret feature that is very likely in Starfield is a fully working radio. And I've got loads of thoughts about this. The idea is you'll be able to hop in your ship, turn on the radio, and listen to music as you hurtle through the stars. And there are a few theories as to how this will be implemented, like whether it's just music or will your radio be giving you story updates and news bulletins as well. So let's dive into all that, but first, the evidence that we have for radio stations. We can see this poster of a musician. Now, this isn't much to go on at first, but let's extrapolate it. If there's a prominent musician in the game, there's likely a way for them to distribute their music. And the way to do that, you would think, is through radio stations. Performers certainly aren't new to Bethesda. In Skyrim, we have a whole list of bards who love to play at taverns. And there's even a whole bard's college for them to go to, located in Solitude. And there are musicians in Fallout 4 too, like Magnolia, who performs in a bar in the town of Goodneighbor. But let's say for a second that there are indeed radios. How would that even work? Would it not take days or months for the radio signals to reach your ship? Well, maybe you'll hear radio stations only when you're near populated settlements, radio stations local to the area. When you reach a system with a news station, your radio could replay a section of news based on recent events. Then when you get out into the wilderness, the radio signals disappear, which also would emphasize your isolation. The radio would also be a good way to get quests, like letting you get new info on bounties, pointing you towards a settlement you haven't been to yet, picking up a creepy loop of a broadcast of someone who's long since passed, or showing you a distress signal that you can go and investigate. But these would all be pre-recorded transmissions. What about a fully working real-time radio with instant transmissions and communications? Well, Starfield is set in 2330, which means there could be some futuristic technology that makes it possible. In a universe with faster than light travel, it's not hard to believe they'd also have faster than light communications. Mass Effect gives us a great example of this. It uses quantum entanglement technology to let you communicate with people across vast distances, and it does that instantly. The way it works in the game is that when a pair of quantum entangled particles is separated, a change to one particle will affect the other one instantaneously, wherever it lies in the universe. Quantum entanglement communication exploits this effect to transmit data any distance, all the way across space. And as a result, you can read your emails while you're gazing at the stars. Sadly, quantum entanglement technology is completely wishful thinking. It does not exist. But hey, who's to say Bethesda writers can't rip off this idea? Or else come up with a similar way to let you check your spaceship DMs. As for the music itself, an alternate way it could work other than you tuning into different stations is that maybe you collect old data sticks with music on them, sort of like how it works in games like Subnautica or Metal Gear Solid 5. You could find songs, podcasts, or audio logs and listen to them as you fly, and I kind of like this idea. But what does music sound like 2,000 years in the future? That's going to be a difficult task for any composer to come up with, so instead I think they're going to go backwards with this idea. Music in Starfield will be old rather than new. Tracks from the 60s and 70s are going to feature, I think, a bit like Guardians of the Galaxy. Not only will this make you feel all nostalgic for Earth, but save composers having to invent a futuristic genre of music. Even if it turns out there are no individual tracks you can listen to on a radio, we already know the in-game background score is phenomenal. Bethesda even put out videos showing off how it sounds. Here's a little taste. That's by a composer by the name of Inon Zur, who's worked with Bethesda for 20 years and done games like Dragon Age Origins and the last 3 Fallout games. For me, I still remember how good the Skyrim and Oblivion soundtracks were, and I still listen to them to this day. So yeah, the Starfield soundtrack will hit that same high standard. And if it doesn't, we have a backup option. It's called Sidewinder Radio, and players of Elite Dangerous will already know about this. It's a free, fan-run website that broadcasts a mix of ambient, electro, techno, and space-themed music right in your browser, and it does that 24/7. So yeah, while I think it's a long shot that we'll have a real-time radio in Starfield with different shows and stations, I don't think it's a huge ask to have preset signals we can come across during our travels, as well as songs we can collect on data sticks. And at the very least, the game's orchestral score is absolutely banging. Okay, here's not so much a feature of Starfield as an ongoing mystery you'll delve into. What's happened to the Earth? And I've got a pretty good idea of what it could be. The question of what's happened to the Earth is actually one of the driving forces of the game's story. This is mentioned by lead quest designer Will Shen in this official Bethesda video. Now, it's not clear how the Earth will actually appear in Starfield. Will it be a largely intact planet we can actually land on and look around? This is unlikely, since it would be massively labor intensive to recreate familiar geography and landmarks, rather than use procedural generation, which is how they build the other planets we'll go to. Maybe Earth is entirely intact, but to save Bethesda time in having to design it, you can't land on it, and maybe one of the reasons they give for this is the Kessler syndrome, which is a real-world phenomenon in which the amount of junk in orbit around Earth reaches a point where it just creates more and more space debris, blocking your ship from entering the atmosphere. Maybe instead they'll let us land on a small closed off piece of Earth with the reasoning that you've only got landing permission for this one specific area. But that doesn't really fit with the whole what happened to Earth thing if you could just land on it. I think the calamity is bigger. It seems like Earth has suffered a catastrophic event that spurred on this rise of interstellar exploration, and we've actually got a clue as to what this catastrophe could be. Looking at this image, one of the books on the locker's shelf is Omega, The Last Days of the World. It's a novel written in 1894 by Camille Flammarion. In this novel, Earth is an academic utopia threatened by a newly discovered asteroid. So maybe in Starfield, a massive asteroid was heading on a collision course with Earth, forcing humanity to flee to the stars before going a bit further. Who's to say the Earth is even there at all? Maybe it's been totally obliterated. It would still be consistent with the what happened to Earth question, and chimes with the bit of the footage where we hear mention of old Earth artifacts, suggesting that Earth holds some sort of reverence, almost like people are really nostalgic for it and they're mourning its destruction and want to collect any piece of it they can. Other than an asteroid, there are so many disasters that could have happened. Solar flares, AIs run amok, maybe the old favourite, nuclear annihilation. But these are more sudden events which wouldn't give humanity enough time to build ships loaded with resources to establish new colonies, whereas getting wind of a far-off asteroid that's set to strike in a few years would. So what's happened to the Earth? I'm leaning in the direction of a massive, unavoidable asteroid. Anyway, those were some features I think are coming to Starfield based on everything we've seen so far. But what do you think? Let me know what you think of my theories in the comments, and if you've got theories of your own that I didn't mention, feel free to tell me about that too. And one last thing, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like. That's always massively appreciated. And for more Starfield videos, subscribe to the channel.